have a lot of questions. So thank you for lots of folks that sent them in. So awesome. Teoman is asking, is there one power tool you regretted buying because you used it only a few times? If so, which one was it?
That's a good question. I would love to hear other people's stories on this. Actually, I'm not lavish in my purchasing of power tools, as a lot of you know. I would normally, if I had a project where I knew I was going to benefit by buying a new machine or tool for it, I would definitely buy it and figure I'd fold it into the cost of the project. However, there are times when your friends call you up and say, I found the best deal ever on these, whatever, usually they're old tools. And I'm a sucker for old tools or lathes and stuff like that. A friend of mine, we went and bought some older tools, and I would say I have a tenoner in the corner, a door tenoner. I didn't need a tenoner like that. What I found out when I bought many older machines is that you can't see the little thing that's wrong with them, the reason they're being sold oftentimes, you know, until you get them in your shop and you really start working with them, you go, oh, what's wrong with this? What's wrong with this joiner table? It's not flat. This joiner will not shoot a straight edge, you know, stuff like that. So usually it's been old tools that I've gotten, seldom new, because I usually know what I'm buying, and you know, I usually try to buy good things. So that's that.
Tom is asking, he says, I'm building the Epic dining chairs and would like to know if you think free tenons would work on that project.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been actually asked quite a few times in the past when we've had that course. A number of people wanted to use their domino or other types of floating tenon tools to make their mortises and have free floating tenons. You just want to size them appropriately, you know, get as close as you can to those tenon sizes. That's a good rule of thumb.
All right, Dennis says, how to keep plunge routers plunging smoothly.
I went to a seminar where a guy did a whole big thing on routers. It's the plunge mechanism. These posts get kind of sticky sometimes. I think if you bring them all the way up, I think you very lightly hit them with steel wool, but you don't want to change the dimension. And then some kind of light machine oil. I guess, I'm not sure if jojoba oil would work, but that's what Lee Nielsen used a lot on the tools. But I would just use a very light machine oil on these posts, and that will keep it going. Bring it all the way up and make sure there's no gunk or sludge on there, and that will be smooth plunging, as far as I know. Anyone else want to chip in on that? But that's not a big fix, hard fix.
Okay, Dan says, I'm making several sewing boxes for Christmas presents. Wow, Dan, you are the man, way ahead. Approximately 12 inches by 8 inches by 6 inches, having a hinged lid and removable tray, maybe a drawer too. The bulk of the boxes will be mahogany with dovetailed corners. Any suggestions for a complementary wood for the top? Maybe a fancy mahogany veneer?
It depends. You know, when it comes to wood, do you want to complement or contrast in the same kind of family? I'm not big on big, strong contrast personally, but if you want something really kind of close that I found really is great, veneer, Hickory crotch veneers. I remember getting it from Certainly Wood. They're similar to mahogany crotch veneers, but way more feathery. You get way better look, and they come much larger, and it wasn't as expensive. So you could check out Hickory crotch. I would put some type of figured thing on the top there and then have it. So there's all kinds of, look at the exotics and the crotch and burls. A burl is another beautiful option. You know what else looks good is Ambonia burl, Mappa burl. If that'll give you a little stronger contrast, but so many possibilities. But I would check out the veneer options because you can get more exciting materials.
Okay. Peter is asking, would you recommend to someone just starting out in woodworking to start with learning to use hand tools before learning to use power tools, like hand planes before a power planer and dovetails by hand before using a dovetail jig?
I think it's great advice, honestly. We're about to do some courses for younger people, and that is definitely the way to go, because when you're physically cutting the wood, you're feeling the resistance and the texture. You understand so much more what's happening during the cut, which is going to make you a better woodworker in the long run. When you start using tools and machines, sometimes you think, oh, I can cut this any direction I want, or you're not really as aware of the resistance factor, and it's more dangerous when you don't have that understanding of the material as much as what's going to happen. So I would definitely try to use hand tools to start off. Use more friendly woods at first, like white pine or poplar or something real nice and planeable, give you some confidence, and then go to a little stronger woods.
Okay, Scott says, I just bought an aftermarket fence for my Shop Fox 14-inch bandsaw because the stock fence was not good for resawing in many aspects. I'm resawing red oak to final thickness of 3/8 inch for a removable game table top that is 60 inches long. Wow. Is there a rough rule of thumb or tips you could provide about how much extra I should add to the cut thickness so that I can reliably plane it to 3/8 inch over 60 inches?
That's a great question. I've tried to, sneak and cut more closer to the line many times and gotten burned. But when resawing, what we're talking about is taking a wider board and flipping it up on edge and just cutting it to thinner thicknesses all the way down. So what happens when you're resawing a board, that board of a given thickness has stabilized at that thickness. So, it's been a lot more humid lately around here. So the outside of those boards have more water in them, but the center has not been affected quite as much yet. So when you cut that, like let's say you cut it into 3 pieces, like a 2-inch piece, 3 cuts. Those outsides now are going to restabilize. Now you got all this moisture on the outside. They're going to restabilize, and usually they're plane sawn or something. They're going to cup a certain amount. But you know what's funny? Like the center piece, that center rib, is almost always stays dead flat. So because you haven't changed the relationship, it's not been altered. So I'm always trying to make sure I take more on the outsides. You need a wider cut. I would say as a general rule, you need a 1/4 inch more, believe it or not, because it depends how wide the plank is too, because they're going to cup, they're going to do stuff, and you're going to end up losing it. You know what I mean? Like you'll lose that board. So I would, in general, go with a 1/4. But if it's that centerpiece, I'm not as worried about it because those generally stay pretty flat. So I hope that answered your question. I don't really have enough detail. Every project is different. The material's different. It depends where it's been stored. Is it plane sawn? Is it 1/4? How wide is it? All of that. So it's sometimes you get burned and you think you got it figured out. Yeah.
Okay, Spencer's asking, when spraying shellac, what is your cleaning regimen for the gun? Regimen, yeah. That's a great question. What I love about shellac is that it's way easier to keep your gun clean with shellac than something like lacquer, or especially conversion varnishes, which are curing. They're 2 parts, so you got to make sure you get your gun really clean. But shellac is really nice because I'm usually spraying it at 1.5 pound, 2 pound cut. We're going to be doing more down in the finishing room now that we're getting it clean. But this would be one of the things I would show. I have my hose on it. I just pour out the shellac back into the container, and then I'll fill up into the gravity feed cup with just denatured alcohol. And yes, you're right. I would then spray that alcohol through. You can open it up a little, get a good full spray going through, and then back off the sprayer so you just have air, and the air blows out the last bits, okay? Now, I have found that even doing that, I would end up getting clogged and little tiny clogs and stuff like that. I found that I can have a cleaner gun every time I pick it up if I do the second step. And this is very high-tech and expensive, but I'm going to share it with you right now. I take like a plastic cup like this. This happens to be a sour cream, but something smaller in plastic like this. And I'll
I've cut it out. I did this just before to try to show you this. I'll notch those out and in such a way that I can set the gun in so that just the nose of it goes down and touches the bottom, okay? But it's still gonna balance in this cup a little bit. Is it gonna be, yeah. You can lean it on a wall or whatever like that. So then you only have to pour a little denatured alcohol in the cup, enough to submerge the head of it. These pinholes, as you probably know, are what get notoriously clogged. So just keep it there. You've already sprayed it out, aired it out, and then drop it in your alcohol there, and it's gonna work great every time you pick it up. You'll have to spray I just start off by spraying the alcohol again, and then dump it out, and then I'm off and going. So hopefully that helps you. All right.
Great. Okay, Tony says, I'm working with 3/32 ebony banding for a serpentine tabletop.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
I find it very brittle and stiff, making it hard to fit the grooves with alternating curves.
Yeah.
What do you do to make the material more pliable, short of steam bending? It doesn't have a steam box.
Okay, that's a great question, Tony. I have some experience with this. Now, I've done a lot of that. Sometimes I'd have to go around a tighter bend, and I know what you're dealing with there. The simplest way is a method that Terry Moore showed me a while ago, and that's just taking water and saturating it as much as you can. And then if you've been in some of these classes I show, like bending the stick around, you want to try, you'll tape it off. After it's been saturated, you're going to take a hot iron, tape the beginning point, and then you're going to go around a curved form that's a little tighter than the radius that you're going to apply it in. And then you can just iron it, go really slow here, and the heat on that is going to start making it be a little more pliable, okay? Then you'll tape it off. When you let it dry, and then when you pop it off, it's going to spring back, but it's going to have a curve to it. So it's already kind of trained. It's going to spring back. Now, I did another method early in my career. I don't know if you remember this. When I first started working with this, I went in a house and I had all these sticks of just what you're talking about. Some of it was 1/8 by 1/8. And I got out the turkey roasting pan. And I put a little, an inch of water in there, because it was longer. And almost like spaghetti, sticking out of the pan, I had these black sticks like sticking out. Put the lid on, and you can just boil it. You don't need to steam it. That heat, I just let it sit in there for like 30 minutes or more. You're going to get more pliability with it. And then again, when it comes out, you want to be ready with your forms that are a little tighter than the curves that you're cutting. That will train it. You won't have to buy a big steam box. You just need kind of a long pan or something like that. And that was kind of weird in the kitchen, but you do what you got to do and work great. So hopefully that'll help. You don't need to steam, but you can physically boil, because ebony is very dense and brittle. I know exactly what you're talking about, but because it's so thin, it'll work. It won't take you that long. Experiment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Andrew's asking, will there be any segmented bowl turning in the near future?
Oh, wow. I'm not into that really, Andrew. I would love to say I would, but there's people around that do stuff like that. One guy is amazing with this, is Claude Dupuis. He's in the League of New Hampshire Craftsmen. He's won crazy awards for segmented bowls. I would look at someone like him. Shoot, I forget his
Canterbury
website.
Turnings.
Yeah, look him up
on
online. Canterbury Turnings. He happens to live down the street from me, like a mile and a half. And even then, I don't see him enough. But anyway,
Okay, I have
check
a
that out.
follow-up question from Tony, just real quick. Can you microwave it after soaking?
Oh, geez, I don't know. I've not tried that, Tony, but I was assuming you needed longer sticks. But if the sticks are short enough, I would try it.
Okay.
You just take a short stick and experiment with what you can get away with. Maybe wrapping it in some rag or something, and then microwave it, and then see how pliable it is, because the iron is the least effective in getting the heat and moisture through. The boiling works, but that might work great. You just got to make sure there's enough moisture on it to penetrate while it's heating and give you the move and then get it on your form.
Okay, I don't know if this is an easy one to answer, but I'm going to throw it at you. Danny says, how do you build and fit a corner brace to stabilize the legs on a coffee table? 4 legs, 4 rails, mortise and tenon rails, and rails to legs. Is that pretty involved?
How do you build and put in a corner brace on a coffee table? If it's mortise and tenon, it's pretty darn strong. Usually if I'm putting in braces, I'm using the old school method of glue blocks. Like inside where that rail meets that leg, you've got, usually it's a 90-degree, but you know, it can be angled depending on the nature of the piece. But just a vertical piece, and usually they're only, you know, the apron, you're going to be a 1/4 inch shorter than the apron anyway. Yes, it's going in cross grain, but it's not enough to fail. You size that just right to fit into that angle. And the block is just like 3/4 by 3/4. And then you chamfer the outside. Old school, but super effective. Now you've got the joint and then backed up with a glue block that's on the outer 2 faces of that joint. And you're inside the edge of the table. That's a great way to reinforce rather than using, you don't want to use that angle brace with the screws and stuff. That's a factory. I think you're much better putting a nice glue block, assuming your joint is strong and good. Yeah.
Par, who is our friend who lives in Sweden, right?
Yes. Hey, Par.
He's asking, any chance that you and Chris will do a live, early Saturday live chat so that we'll be on the other side of the Atlantic and see you live? So Par and Caroline, his wife. Yeah, you know, we do our Coffee with Tom on Saturday mornings for the neighborhood, Par. So, I don't know, join the neighborhood and then you can have that delight.
Yeah, if you're in the neighborhood, we do a lot of Saturday morning courses. We do that once a month. We do the coffee where I just hang out. And we've started this new thing where we're doing open shop, where I'm going to be doing about an hour or so of an actual process. Unlike, you know, I'm always trying to show you the real thing, but a lot of times I'll just show you the brief thing and then we'll go to the next step. But actual process, mostly it'll revolve around finishing and, you know, things we can talk while we're doing it. Almost like you just stopped by the shop and I was working and we were talking and you know, you could ask questions, but I'm going to just keep working and show you more the in-depth of the real time things take and methods.
Very
so we'll
cool.
be doing some spraying. Yeah, definitely down.
We did one already, so another one's coming. All right, Michelle is saying, I'm going to be making some bow bread knives. What food safe finish would you use?
If you read Bob Flexner's book, he says almost every finish is food safe once it cures. Because it's those VOCs, the volatile organic compounds that off gas. That's the harmful nature of most finishes. But it's hard to convince people that, you know, to put varnish like on a bowl. So everybody always says it's got to be food safe. Well, shellac is food safe, but it's not super durable. But there are others. I'm sorry, I don't have a deep well and when it comes to what's out there right now as food safe because I'm not doing a lot of that, but a lot of, you know, the cutting boards will put mineral oil, which doesn't technically cure. So sorry I can't be more helpful than that. I should. Some people can chip in that do more of that work.
Okay, Stephen's asking on a cabinet saw, what type of lubricants do you use on the gears? The
key is to get all the dust out. If you don't have one, invest in like a powerful blower. This is a little air, put your air compressor on there. Because this comes out to such a fine point, man, this rockets air out there, right? So you're gonna put on your dust mask, you're gonna vacuum out as much as you can. The key is to get all that dust out of the gears and everything. That's what's building up and makes things start to slow down. It's like, just slows the whole thing. So you gotta get it all out first. And then, you know what? He just lubricated with a non-detergent oil, just a little oil in there. You would say, oh, that's going to bring in dust and attract it. I haven't actually had to oil my new I haven't done anything yet to my new saw stop, so I can't tell you. But I used to use that method on the Powermatic 66, and it went really nice. If anyone else has mechanical experience like that, please chime in, because that's not my most field of expertise. I just do what I have to do to get it going so we can do some work.
Okay, Dennis says, I was given a 48-inch pin oak cut into 8-inch thick cookies. Pine oak, it must be, or pin oak, anyway. Yeah. What can I do with it besides firewood?
That's a good question. I got these big cookies. I'm not quite sure what to do either. I've got these 33-inch ash, 4-inch thick. I actually, obviously it makes some nice tables. I have this idea for like a nice coffee station, like a bar top. But you got to just deal with the cracks in it. I don't want it fully round. I'm going to probably cut it back off so it's kind of rounded out like that. Anyway, I always think of coffee tables. I'd like to see the suggestions of other people in the comments. What do you think? What would you advise for projects for that type of cookie? I think by cookie, you're talking about a slice cut through the trunk of a tree. So you have a round wafer, basically 48 inches. That's massive. That's pretty cool.
Okay, Kevin's saying, do you have experience with Laguna Resaw King bandsaw blades?
No, but I have heard really good things about them. So actually I might, because my neighbor across the street that used to live there 10 years ago, he had a Laguna bandsaw, and he used to buy those great blades, and they worked great. They had the little carbide tips on them. Those specialized like Resaw blades, I've never heard anyone complain about them, except for the price. There's a lot of money for them, and I could buy several blades for the same price, and I've been cheap about it. If I was going to do a ton of resawing, I would probably invest in one, but I don't have one to use, but I have used his, and it worked really nicely, but they still dull, So I don't have a ton of experience using them, but I've heard from friends they work great. So
okay.
Anyone chime in if you've had personal experience.
Andrew's asking, if you had to make a mini workbench to do things like carving or dovetailing, what design would you use?
Carvers a lot of times just make an accessory vise that goes into their regular vise and gets it up higher, so you can carve at a comfortable height. Like, you're either going to sit down, right? But then you can't work all around the piece. But I've seen people have like a block carver wood vices, and they would just use their regular vise and put it into their, mount it onto the table. And then you have this accessory vise up in the air. So sort of like a Moxon gives you this wide mouth clamp for wide panels. That is a specialized vise that gets you the height. So I would do something like that. But if I was going to have a special bench like that, I'd probably build one like half the size of my regular bench, make it beefy and strong so it doesn't move around. But it's got to have a wide enough stance to really hold in there.
Can you speak about the pros versus the cons of the sliding table saw?
Oh, yeah. Well, I've been talking about doing a feature on the Felder. The sliding table saws are more designed for panel. They're just amazing with panel cutting, because they can handle wide panels and large panels without you lifting a lot. And the slides, so you're getting these beautiful cross cuts on these large cuts that would be awkward and clumsy to handle on a regular cabinet saw. So they are really great on that. I've got the accessory angle fence. I can cut unbelievably accurate angles to the perfect degree. So it's really a great tool. You can build a lot of jigs onto the slider of these European sliders. And when you build these jigs, the slider just basically travels right next to the saw blade. So the beauty of that system is you can do great accurate things, but the best thing really is the safety factor. Because while you're making all these cuts, you're standing to the left side of the blade. The slider is going past the blade. All the work is falling over freely. You almost never have that potential of getting trapped between the fence and the blade, which leads me to the downside. It doesn't work great as a rip saw, because it's awkwardly positioned with the with the slider table, they're just so geared around that to rip, it's clumsy position you're in to use it as a rip saw. So it can be though, however. So I have used it for that, but I usually use the cabinet saw for that, and that's like a unbelievable crosscut saw. I use it a lot for angled work and things like that.
Hickory, good wood for the workbench?
I think so.
Larry's curious.
Yeah, hickory's hard. I haven't looked at how much it moves, but just make sure if it's all commonly dried and you orient it in a very similar fashion so that your grain is all kind of going the same way, it'll stay flatter and truer over time. But it's a good hard wood, so I'm sure it'll be, I think it's probably a lot like hard maple, but you can look on that site. I really like this new site we found. What is it called? About the wood movement.
For wood movement calculator?
Yeah, it's called Wood Movement Calculator, and there's a link to it. We'll connect it to the end of this video, but that is a really cool site because it tells you the exact, you plug in the kind of wood you have, the dimensions, where you live in the country, what time of year it is, and it'll tell you roughly how much it's going to move. So you can find out right away, if that's going to move a lot. Or you could look at charts for relative movement.
Okay, I'm going to end with this question. It's a little more personal for you. Nicole's curious, what do you wish you'd known earlier in your woodworking career?
Oh.
And maybe what is inspiring you now, if you want to combine those two.
Okay. Yeah.
And then we'll close. That's the last. We've done a lot of good questions.
Whew, I wish I knew earlier. Well, my career actually started when I was 13, 14. I went to vocational school. I wish, this was 1974, right? I wish the instructor in my shop class had told me about the whole career of fine woodworking. Fine Woodworking magazine just started then. But, so I wasn't exposed to the history and what was going on. And it was always like, oh, you just had to work in a factory, I wasn't aware, and I don't think the instructors in this woodworking school were aware of the art potential side of woodworking. I remember the instructor coming over at one event, and he was really affirming to me. Like he must have seen something, because he came over and over to the side when we were at a union competition. Like these guys in the union, we went on a field trip. These 14, 15-year-olds. And he came over up alongside of me, and he was a man of few words. But he just said, you could be one of these guys. I was flattered that he would say that, because it was big for him to say anything affirming like that. But if someone had just told me about the studio furniture movement that earlier, that would have probably got me into it. I would have found it a lot sooner. And I would have, but I can't, I was just slow to discover what fired me up, and the art of woodworking definitely got me a lot more excited than.
Yeah, and we should add that awakening didn't come until your 29th year. So if anybody's out there and they think that it's too late to make a change, it's not.
No, I mean, a lot of people do make significant changes later on, but I mean, I was always interested in woodworking and everything, but I didn't really discover the ability to make a living at it till later. We're part of a movement, and I'll try to keep this really short, but when manufacturing came into the whole furniture making world in the mid-1800s, early mid-1800s with the Industrial Revolution, a lot of people think furniture of great quality died then, because it was all made to be friendly for machines and speed, and joinery got cheapened, things didn't last as long. And there was a reaction against that. There have always been these reactions historically, and that was when the arts and crafts movement took off in the later 1800s, in Europe first and then in our country. So you saw the stickly stuff and other furniture like that. And so it had much more integrity. They were trying to make things that were beautiful, were wonderful to live with, but, weren't just cheap factory knockoffs, and cheaply made. But then after that, there was this studio furniture movement in this country in the early, You had mid-century modern going on in the Danish countries, like, and they were making for production, but there was more artistry in it, really. And anyway, the studio furniture movement, you are actually part of the later end of the studio furniture movement. If you are into this and you're building and it's caught you caught fire to fine woodworking, you know, that is part of it. The early fine woodworking magazines were tapping into the people who were in the heart of it. We've talked about Wharton Eschrick a lot, Sam Malouf, James Krenoff, very influential, you know, and there's a lot of others I'm forgetting, but they're in those early issues of fine woodworking. They would often interview these guys who are really deeply invested in art furniture, you know. So those guys are influencing me a lot now too. So that's where I go. I still go. Visited Sam Malouf's house last year, Wharton Eschrick's. We're interested in going George Nakashima's place. And
Wendell Castle, we saw.
Yeah, and Wendell Castle's another one, you know, like just all kinds of variety in art. The Wendell Castle School. So that's growing and trying to continue his legacy of this studio furniture world. So that's part of it, and that's what we're part of. I wish I had known about that, but that's really inspired me to this day. A lot of the other guys in the Furniture Masters, as you know, New Hampshire Furniture Masters.org. Check that out. There's a lot of great makers, all part of the studio furniture movement there.
Sounds good. We are good to go.
All right, everyone. Wow, that went longer. I thought we were going to do 30 minutes. We did twice as much. I love sharing times with this. If you guys like this format, every once in a while we like throwing it in there. I enjoy it, but give us a comment or whatever. But thank you once again for hanging out with us in the shop. I really enjoy opening our lives like this. And hey, we've got a lot more. If you go to epicwoodworking.com, we've got a lot of courses. I think if you're into this, you're into the studio furniture thing, you really want to be in the neighborhood. That's a great community of like-minded people sharing ideas, and it just opens up a lot more of the personal connection to our events and things like that.
Yeah.
So,
and opportunities to connect like this.
Yeah, and if you like this content, please consider subscribing and sharing and liking and all that stuff. Thanks again for being with us on behalf of the camera lady and myself. Look forward to seeing you next time right back here on Shop Night Live. She's only going like this right before I do this. No, yeah. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Thanks so much. See you next week.